next week, a slew of absolutely crucial votes in the Commons. So where are we on Brexit? Well, our Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, said this week we may now face meltdown in the talks. And he added, I don't want anyone to panic during the meltdown. No panic. Well, there will be no panic on this programme, just a quiet determination to hold everyone on all sides to account for what they've said to us. I'm joined this morning by Theresa May's effective number 2, David Lidington, by the Labour Brexit spokesman Sir Keir Starmer, and Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. And I've been speaking to the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown about Brexit, Britain and the future of the NHS. Reviewing the news, Helen Lewis of the New Statesman, Fraser Nelson of The Spectator and The Telegraph's Kate McCann. It's going to be a pretty frantic hour. But first, the news with Roger Johnson.
Good morning. President Trump has accused the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of being dishonest and weak after the G7 summit ended with world leaders divided. A joint statement was released vowing to fight the US's decision to impose trade tariffs. Mr. Trudeau claimed that there had been a consensus among all those taking part to fight protectionism, but Mr. Trump has asked his representatives not to endorse the statement. And Donald Trump is due to land in Singapore soon, ahead of that historic meeting with Kim Jong-un. The North Korean leader has arrived within the past hour. It'll be the first time that top-level talks have been held between the two countries, following years of hostility over North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons and its record on human rights. The millionaire Brexit campaigner Aaron Banks has confirmed that he will appear before MPs this week to answer new allegations about his links with Russia. It's being reported in the Sunday Times today that he had more meetings with Russian officials than previously disclosed. This new information has raised fresh questions about whether the Kremlin sought to influence the outcome of the EU referendum in 2016. Meanwhile, the former Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, has led calls for Conservative Party rebels to back the Prime Minister on Brexit ahead of a crucial Commons vote next week. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Ms Rudd, who backed Remain, joined the former party leader Ian Duncan-Smith to call for unity as the government tries to overturn more than a dozen changes to the EU withdrawal bill put forward by the House of Lords. And big companies will soon have to publish and justify the pay gap between highly paid executives and their average workers. Under new laws to be laid out in Parliament tomorrow, UK-listed companies with more than 250 employees will have to disclose their so-called pay ratios every year. The TUC has welcomed the move, but says that workers should also be appointed to company boards. That is it from me. The next news here on BBC One is at 12:15. Now back to you, Andrew.
Many thanks for that, Roger. And now to the papers as ever. And that story about the bad boys of Brexit being exceedingly naughty with Russians is on most front pages, or many front pages. The Sunday Times revealed Brexit backers' golden Kremlin connection. That's a reference to gold mines. Mail on Sunday has Brexit, new secret Putin connection, it says. And then there's the Observer. Top Brexit funder had multiple meetings with Russian officials. Of course, he had every right to do that. We'll talk about that shortly. There's the Sunday Express and the other big story of the day, which is, of course, Brexit generally. Theresa May savaging the Lords over Brexit, behaving improperly and unconstitutionally, she says. And then there's the Telegraph. All the papers, again, I should say, have pictures of the royal family out on the Buckingham Street, Buckingham Palace balcony, and the youngest royals behaving a little bit cheekily. Back May or Corbyn will get in, the rebels are told. The great threat hanging over the Conservative Party at the moment. So much to talk about. Shall we start with Theresa May and Brexit and the week ahead? Fraser.
Yeah, well, we've got the so-called Super Tuesday coming up with all of these votes on the Brexit legislation.
It's 14 big votes and it goes on all day and all night, pretty much.
But the consensus is that it won't really damage her because of the reasons the Sunday Telegraph says, that you really want to destabilise her. Even Amber Rudd, a big leading light in the Remain campaign, is saying to her party, you've got to back Theresa May here. Implication, you can ditch her later on because Jeremy Corbyn's the bigger threat. So for all of the votes, I don't think the parliamentary drama, the political drama, isn't wasn't going to be nearly as great on Tuesday as we suspected.
Kate McCann, you're watching this day in, day out in the lobby in the House of Commons. Do you agree with that she's going to win these votes?
I think so. This really is one for the political geeks, I think, because actually on the face of it, it's not really about these votes at all. It's about the calculations going on in the Conservative Party behind the scenes. And there's a really telling line in this Observer story. There's a quote here from a Tory saying it's a political calculation. And actually what they're talking about is that there are lots of Tory rebels who might want to back these amendments, but they don't want to do it now because they think if they do, they could destabilise the Prime Minister and you might end up having a leadership contest before they're really ready for it.
So back to the old story, which is that Tory hardcore Remainers are terrified of a Brexiteer taking over from Theresa May and vice versa.
Yeah.
Both sides think we're not absolutely sure about her, but we could get somebody much worse.
Yeah.
So sit in our hands. Yeah.
But then, of course, the bigger threat is cabinet resignations. I mean, the Sunday Times has got a very detailed story about she almost had 2 cabinet resignations last week. She could get others quitting. If the Brexiteers think she's about to sell them out with a deal that they couldn't count on.
So this is the threat. So David Davis went in and we're told didn't actually say I'm going to resign unless, but nonetheless his demeanour was slightly menacing, as it can be from time to time. The implication here is that there's some kind of informal agreement among the leading Brexiteers that if one goes, they all go.
Yes, and they wanted a fig leaf, and they were given a fig leaf of this date. You know, we're going to be out of the EU, but not institutions by this certain date. But you get the feeling that that's going to be rejected by the EU and that the resignation has been averted, in fact, down the line, but it still will come. The only question is when.
And this talk of a meltdown in the talks, certainly the rhetoric is getting harder and harder on the European side of the argument. Are we going to see a sort of punchier Theresa May, do you think, coming up to this summit?
Well, that's what Boris Johnson has told us in his leaked tape last Tuesday, that there's going to be a Theresa May playing hardball, there's going to be a meltdown. I'm not quite so sure, though. I mean, the British position seems to get weaker every time it's rejected by the EU, and I think we are heading towards a kind of compromise which most Tory MPs, I think, would actually back, where we would actually stay in the single market for goods, perhaps not services, but it would be something in order just to get this off the political agenda.
You think they would actually swallow staying inside the single market in some respects?
I think there'll be something along those lines.
Fascinating.
Now, I think most Tory MPs would back that, by no means all. But remember, she needs to get this past Parliament. She needs all of her party to back it, because if they don't, then it's no deal.
So in the unsatisfactory jargon of all of this, we are heading towards a soft Brexit.
I don't know if you can call it a soft Brexit, but it certainly will be a Brexit which I suspect would satisfy most of the people who voted for Brexit. But the big question the Tories are grappling with is, would that lead to uproar and us being kicked out of office? David Davis is talking about the worst defeat since 1997 if they were to compromise in that way. They just don't know.
You just don't know. Helen, I want to come on to the other big political story with you, if I may, which is the long and rather tangled story of leaked emails and correspondence between Isabel Oakeshott on the one hand, Aaron Banks, who did the unofficial, very successful, very punchy Leave.eu campaign.
It's a story with everything. There's Stalin's vodka, there's personalised number plates that say ex-MI5 spy, there's gold mines. But to sum it up, Aaron Banks is a big donor to UKIP and also a big donor to Leave.eu, which is the unofficial kind of grassroots, Nigel Farage-backed campaign, not Vote Leave, the official campaign.
But the biggest donor to British politics in British political history, is that right?
Yeah, which came about basically because I think he felt snubbed by William Hague, who said, "Who is this guy?" And he said, "Well, I'll show him who he is," and started giving huge amounts of money to UKIP and then poured, I think, 8 million into Leave. What we found out from these emails is that he had more meetings with either the Russian ambassador or Russian contacts than he'd previously revealed. So I think he calls him some dodgy bloke called Oleg came up to him. And what happens when you meet a dodgy bloke called Oleg? You agree to have lunch with him. Of course you do.
Obviously you do. And originally, in classic Aaron Banks style, he said he could only remember one boozy lunch with the Russian ambassador.
Well, it lasted for 6 hours, so I'm not
That's
surprised
quite
he
a lump.
can't remember very much of it. But, I mean, there's, what we know about Russia's kind of foreign policy is that it wants to kick up a huge amount of dust around stuff. It's this kind of policy of info smog. So whether or not there is anything that is criminal or unethical about this, we know certainly that Russia was very much in favour of Brexit. They saw it as something that was very destabilising. In the same way they were very much in favour of the election of Donald Trump, because they saw it as destabilising the kind of liberal rules-based world order.
And quite extraordinarily, it's revealed that the Russian ambassador, on behalf of Putin, no doubt, went to Banks and Co. and said, "Do you by any chance have the mobile numbers of the Trump team?"
And I think this was the main
channel to Trump.
This was the main value to them. They might not have got anything Brexit-wise, but they got some mobile phone numbers at the end after discussing and dangling all of these strange gold mine deals. officials. So I think this tells us more about how Russia operates and seeks to influence MPs than it does about the Brexit campaign and how it played out.
Can I ask about the origins of this story? Because it's very interesting. We had Carol Cadwallader of The Observer, whose name is on the byline of The Observer story here, and we had Isabel Oakeshott, whose emails these originally were, apparently gathering dust in her attic, she said, for a while. And what appears to be a classic piece of journalistic skullduggery on both sides.
So Isabel Oakeshott says she has these emails kind of gathering dust from when she wrote a book with Aaron Banks called The Bad Boys of Brexit, but she hadn't looked at this, they'd been kind of gathering dust. And then Carol Cadwallader of The Observer, as I think it's been fair to say, as well as writing articles, has been exchanging lively Twitter conversations with Aaron Banks for some time. So at that point, it seems The Observer got hold of these emails and then a kind of in a classic, as you say, newspaper skullduggery, decided, well, if they're coming out, then let's have the Sunday Times might as well put them out as well.
That's why they're on both front pages.
And tweeted about last night before the front pages.
Yeah, Kate, the government says this is nothing to do with us, all this stuff. This is the unofficial campaign. Our finger marks are nowhere near this, and that's true. But is it absolutely nothing to do with the government, do you think?
Well, I think we'll find out in the coming days exactly how much it is to do. But I think what this does highlight is, as Fraser says, what Russia really does seek to do is to try and use back channels and people that are willing to speak to them. I think Isabel Oakeshott in the paper calling these two, willful idiots today, people that are happy to go to these lunches and talk and exchange phone numbers so that they can do diplomacy.
I guess my point is, here we have Theresa May at the summit, attacking the Russians for this, that and the other, having a really bad time with Putin at the moment. And back home it's revealed that one of the two campaigns that delivered the verdict in the referendum, which she is now implementing, had Russian influence.
Yeah, and there is a wider point here actually about the G7, which is that when Trump walks out of that summit early and it ends in a way that lots of other people don't want it, at the summit don't want it to end, that doesn't look good for the West in terms of its relations with Russia, because what Russia wants to see is people disagreeing. France and the UK, and for them, if that group of people, the G7, is united, that's a bad thing. So when Trump walks out, that actually is quite a good thing.
I think it's an extraordinary moment in world politics. You're seeing nothing less than the remaking of basically the world order, right? Which is that Trump now is much more at home with authoritarians. He loves dictators because, you know what, he can do kind of weird masculine photo opportunities with them. He likes talking to Kim, as we know, he likes talking to Putin.
He doesn't like talking to Theresa May.
And Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel, who say things like, well, rules have to be obeyed. Sometimes you can't just kind of make a deal on the back of an envelope. We have all these systems in place.
This has been, in truth, a very important and extraordinary summit, hasn't it? I mean, we've had Donald Trump going into it threatening a trade war, and that threat is still on the table despite everything that's said, and now he's off, of course, to see Kim Jong-un.
I think it's important for what it symbolises. I mean, G7 summits tend to be an opportunity for photo calls rather than great agreements. And what a photograph we've got today, the Sunday Telegraph shows. It just you could have, cartoonists could have done this to demonstrate the nature of world relations. Here you've got Donald Trump, arms folded, intransigent. I don't care. I'm going to give you all of our tariffs. And everybody, you've got, Japanese, the German, Canadians, all trying to talk him out of it. But he doesn't care. If anything, he revels in the kind of antagonism.
The body language is so fantastic there. Angela Merkel leaning forward across the table like the kind of silverback ape in charge of the thing, and Trump sitting there with his arms crossed saying no with every bodily action he can bring himself up.
Yeah, and this, looking at this photograph, you can pretty much tell all you need to know, really, about the status of trade negotiations in the G7. And perhaps this is why Donald Trump wanted to leave early, because he realised it would just be this for 2 solid days.
Well, let's talk finally about where he's going next, Kate McCann, because you've got the New York Times there on your glossy tablet.
Exactly. And this week, this will be one of the most fascinating things to watch. And I think actually what Fraser's saying is really interesting. Look at this picture again. Look at Donald Trump sat down. He's sat down and everybody else has stood up. What will come out of this meeting, I think, this week, is we'll be able to see Trump. I mean, he said going up to it, well, I'll know instantly because I'll make a judgment when I meet this guy. I'll know. And someone said, well, how will you know whether it's going to work or not? And he said, oh, just touch, just the feel of it.
It's that New York property developers' instinct coming through.
And actually, lots of people have lots of things to say about Donald Trump and his style of diplomacy. And you can make all those comments on that. But at the same time, there's something about world leaders. Maybe Donald Trump's way of interacting with these people actually could get things done. And if you leave the policy to the people around him, maybe. I mean, maybe I'm being overly optimistic.
Like if you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you. I think what will happen is that Kim Jong-un will love bomb him. There'll be some weird photo opportunity, probably with fireworks going on in the background. He'll have a massive military parade, and then absolutely nothing will get decided.
Lots of fabulous hair. On that, I'm afraid we have to leave it for now. Thank you very much indeed. It's a busy, busy morning. And so to the weather, it's beginning to feel a lot like summer. But because this is Britain, that doesn't mean no rain. Over to Alina Jenkins. Alina.
Good morning. Yes, a lot of dry weather around today, some spells of sunshine, but still the chance of some thunderstorms, and those most likely to see them will be across eastern parts of Scotland, perhaps a few creeping into northern England, and also once again for the Channel Islands, but for much of the country dry with some spells of sunshine. And through the morning, the mist and the low cloud that we've had will slowly thin and break, so there'll be some warm spells of sunshine coming through. Showers already getting going across eastern Scotland, and they will continue through the afternoon. Further east than they were yesterday, but still a rumble of thunder, flash of lightning, a few of those getting into northern England, and for the Channel Islands, a few lighter showers for Wales and southwest England. Northern Ireland should be largely dry, save for the odd rogue shower. And in the sunshine, 19 to 24 Celsius, the top temperature today, maybe up to 25 in London and southeast England. There'll still be some showers going through this evening, and overnight we'll keep a couple across Scotland and southwest England. Otherwise, it becomes mainly dry. Some clear spells before the cloud starts to creep back in later in the night. Lows between 9 and 14 Celsius, still quite muggy and humid for central and southern England. For much of England and Wales tomorrow, a dry, fine day, some warm spells of sunshine. Cloudy but mainly dry for Northern Ireland, and a lot of cloud across Scotland. We could see some patchy rain through the afternoon. Maybe an afternoon shower across the Pennines. Otherwise, it'll be dry and warm, and temperatures in the sunshine tomorrow between 19 and 24 Celsius. Andrew, back to you.
Hot and drippy. Well, we haven't heard much from Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, since he quit Number 10. He's been working on aid issues, but he's chosen to live well away from the metropolis, back in his old constituency in Fife. When we met this week, I started by asking him whether living so far from London had changed his political perspective in any way at all.
Well, it's good for my family. My children are at school there, enjoying it very much. And I'm back where I started as in the constituency. Around Britain over these last 2 years, possibly more divided now than at the time of the referendum, which was itself a very divisive event.
And you've produced what looks like a kind of manifesto to heal some of those divisions.
It's not a manifesto, it's ideas. I'm standing back from mainstream politics. I wouldn't actually call myself a politician now, because I'm no longer representing people in Parliament, but I do sense that there are things that could be done better.
Done and aren't being. And I want to go through some of the things you've been saying about that. But before we do,
yes,
this week we have a series of really, really big votes on Brexit, with a customs union and a substantial vote and so forth. Can I ask you, do you think that it is possible for this country to remain in a customs union with the EU, having left the EU?
I think it is, but I think the issue that we've got to resolve is Northern Ireland. I mean, it is absolutely clear to me that if you want a frictionless border between the north and the south, and everybody says that that is what they want, then you've not only got to adhere to some form of customs union or partnership, you've also got to adopt some of the single market regulations. And therefore, this is an issue that I think people have avoided for too long.
But don't you accept that a lot of people watching will feel that if we are effectively still inside the customs union and very close to the single market or part of it, that is a betrayal of the Brexit vote?
No, I don't think it would be. I think, you know, I've been looking at the polls around the country and looking at what people are saying. And I think what's not really been picked up is that none of the options that the government are putting forward at the moment are seen as satisfactory to people. They don't like the options that the hard Brexiteers are putting forward. They do want, I think, to protect our manufacturing industry. People want to be careful about what's a threat to jobs. I think there is an issue also about just maintaining our trading links, and therefore...
But we have voted to leave.
We've voted to leave the European Union as a political union. But look, Westminster can deal with these issues. I am not involved in that. I want to stand back and say, look, what is driving the dissatisfaction? Because we'll find that many of the issues are not related to the technical details of Brexit, They're actually about lost jobs, they're about wages being stagnant, they're about communities feeling left out, they're about the health service actually.
It was a major revolt against the political elites as such.
And you've got to listen and you've got to respect it. And then you've got to ask, what do you do about it? And I think people would expect us to do something about our industry and lost jobs. I think they would expect us to do something about stagnant wages, about left out communities. And I don't know if people thought when they were voting on the technicalities of this or that.
If the government is defeated this week in the House of Commons, Theresa May does not have a proposal she can take to the EU, then we are very close to some kind of breakthrough moment in this whole Brexit story. And you have talked about there being a game changer. You said there'd be a game changer this summer, you thought, which would change everything. Well, has that game changer arrived, and what would it be?
Well, I think the customs union vote is difficult for the Brexiteers, and I think also that her proposal, which I understand is being floated over the course of the last few days, that there would be a longer transition period. That would mean effectively that we were in the customs union until 2023, as far as I understand it, beyond the next general election, and therefore Europe would become the issue of the next general election. So I think all these things are still in the air, but certainly there are two moments of decision in the next few months, one on the customs union and one on what's called the meaningful vote, as to whether, when you get the final terms of negotiation,
MPs can actually
both reject it and perhaps offer an alternative or even discuss another way of consulting the country. Now, the point, however, I would make is I'm not involved in that day-to-day business. I want to stand back and say, look, what have you got to do fundamentally to deal with the grievances that produce this political earthquake and make people understand that we have to unite as a country around common ground, and we've got to find that common ground.
But we have to deal with the Brexit thing first, in the sense that you don't like it being called a manifesto, your suggestions, put it that way, seem very much about Britain still inside in some way the EU and how you then heal the division that caused the original vote. But before we get there, we have to deal with this thing. If the government loses on the customs union, if we are in real political crisis, is that, in your view, the moment that we can start to talk about a second vote for everybody?
I think what will happen if the government loses the vote is that there is potentially the chance of a change of Prime Minister, but I don't think at that point they will want to give up as a government, and I think the 5-year Parliament makes it possible for them to survive. So I think the issues come down to whether the meaningful vote, after the customs union vote, the meaningful vote means that Parliament rejects or potentially could reject the whole settlement, and that's the point of further crisis.
That's another crisis. Now, you've talked about all the underlying reasons for the original Brexit vote, and one of the things you talked about was immigration. And I guess people watching might think, well, that's a bit rich, because that really big rise in immigration from the accession EU countries took place during the Blair-Brown years. And that, in a sense, was where the kind of Euroscepticism, always in the body politic, was kind of supercharged.
Well, I've actually looked at the figures, and that's not actually the case. The biggest Romanian and Bulgarian push was after 2010. But I accept that we did not understand the fears and concerns that people would have about the levels of migration in the country. But what I find really interesting now is that since 2016, almost new developments since the referendum, that in France, in Germany, in Belgium, and in Switzerland, which is under freedom of movement, they are making big changes. And so you've got to register jobs in Switzerland now. You've got to register as workers if you're a migrant in Germany. You can be removed from the country in Belgium if you don't have a job after 9 months.
So they're doing all the things we didn't do.
Yes, and these are things that could be done today. So the European Union could not prevent us doing these things. These things could be done today. Just last week, the European Parliament and France, pushing for it, said that you could not undercut the wages of British or French or whatever workers by paying them Latvian or Eastern European wages in their country. And that's now a law within Europe. So there are things we can do that would actually unite opinion in this country.
Another of the things that you were talking about earlier on was the National Health Service. Now, you famously raised national insurance by a penny. It's actually quite a popular tax rise to bring more money into the NHS, and funding was going up by about 5% year on year during the Blair and Brown years. We're now in the situation where the government seemed to be talking about a rise of maybe 3%. The Labour Party is not much further forward than that. Do we need a bigger rise? Do we need to get back to the 4 to 5% rises to save the NHS?
I think if we don't do something now, we'll have to do even more later. So the case for doing something now is very strong. And I think you're talking about 3, 4, 5% increases per year. I think you do have to repeat the rise in national insurance. And
Is
I
that
think
your favoured way of paying
Well, I
for
think
this?
it's fairer. I think people would be prepared to pay it. I think it's essentially hypothecated, and therefore people can see the money is actually going to the National Health Service. So if I was doing this, I'd say, first of all, is there any alternative? And I think we'd find there is no alternative but to finding more resources, even although there's a lot of changes we can make. I think secondly, are people prepared to accept it? Yes, if they see the money is directly going into that health service. You can't just impose this without thinking about it. You've got to go out and persuade people and show people that there is no better alternative than actually to put that money into healthcare. Because if we don't do that,
the current Labour proposal
it'll be a lot worse.
is to tax the top 5% to pay for it. But
yes, the current Labour proposal is something that I supported in the manifesto, and I think you will probably have to combine that with a national insurance rise.
You've also talked about wage compression, people feeling up and down the country that, as it were, capitalism has simply not worked for them or their communities. Do you regret, when you were Prime Minister, not basically taking Britain a little bit more to the left than you did and going back to the old Gordon Brown radicalism before you were Chancellor, before you were Prime Minister?
Well, you just talked about the biggest tax rise for a single thing in history, so that was progressive. And we did a number of things that were extremely progressive.
I'm thinking more generally about the relationship between the government and global capitalism.
One of my huge regrets is that we had proposals to reform the global financial system that we were pushing forward after we'd got the country out of recession in 2009. We had this big agenda for transforming the international financial system. My fear is that we will find ourselves in a crisis in a year or two from now. People will ask, why didn't you make these changes when you had the chance to do so? And the chance was there. I'm afraid we didn't stay in power long enough to do it, but it should have been done. So the global financial system as a whole is in need of fundamental reform. And I tell you this, if the last crisis came out of America with subprime mortgages, it could equally well come out of Asia with commercial lending. You can see all the problems, shadow banking, and we will ask ourselves, why did we not act enough?
And this is why John McDonnell is now talking about overthrowing capitalism. The entire system doesn't work. You never went that far.
No,
Do you
because
not
I'm talking about managing globalization in the interests of the people of the world and the people of our country. You see,
isn't he right to talk about overthrowing the system that's not working?
There's an open-ended globalization that I never supported. I always said we had to manage globalization. It wasn't whether we had it or not, it was whether we managed it well or badly. And then there's an anti-globalization movement which says there's nothing we can do, the whole system, you can't do anything except overthrow it. I think it's about managing...
What's wrong with the second bit?
Because it doesn't work. You've got to manage globalization well, and that demands not just, and this is the irony of the situation, people's rebellion against globalization is expressed in nationalism and protectionism, but you cannot manage globalization without international cooperation.
You've been very respectful of Jeremy Corbyn, you've called him a phenomenon, and you said that you regret you couldn't reach younger voters in the way he did. You know, it's not the beard and it's not the shell suit, I suspect. It's the fact that he is more radical in policy terms, and that is really resonating with younger voters in this country.
Well, Jeremy is a phenomenon, and he is reflecting people's concerns about a whole range of issues, some of which I'm myself raising in the speeches that I'm making. But, you know, we go through phases in politics. Look, in 2002, we persuaded people of the need for a tax rise.
Is he a phase?
Well, everything's a phase. I mean, Jeremy himself is going to accept that nobody goes on forever. We're all phases. We're all sort of part of it. Politicians have a short shelf life, actually, in terms of life at the top. I happen to have been Prime Minister when people were resisting some of the proposals that we thought were necessary for the economy. persuaded all the time. You cannot just relax and be complacent. You've got to get out there and persuade people all the time.
This is a slightly strange conversation, if I may, because you have got the passion, you've got the ideas, you sound like somebody still absolutely in the game, but you say, no, 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 I'm not a politician. For your ideas to be translated into actual facts, something needs to change. Are you completely out of the game?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, Andrew, because I've learned
Don't
something.
sound like it.
I've learned something, that you've got a shelf life. I mean, look, people get fed up with you. It's a 24-hour cycle. They see you all the time. They see all your frailties. They see all your weaknesses, as well as perhaps some of your strengths. But they get fed up. They've had enough. And I don't think, I'll be honest, that there will be many politicians that will be at the top for the kind of numbers of years that Margaret Thatcher and Tony were at the top. I think you'll find that there is a far faster turnover of politicians, simply because the 24-hour news cycle exposes people to so much criticism, but also people see and get bored. And I think you can go on forever, Andrew.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted
you can interview all the people, but this is a revolving door.
A revolving door.
And I accept, therefore, the shelf life of people like me was limited.
You mentioned Tony there. Are you back on terms? If he called up and said, I know this great little Italian restaurant, let's have supper sometime, Gordon, would you say yes?
Well, I think I'm actually doing something with him in about 2 weeks from now. So we keep in touch. And you know, you go through all these events and crises, and you've got to stand back sometimes and say, you know, here are people who work together, people who are friends, people who have done things together, sometimes disagreed, but disagreed probably out of principle and not out of anything else.
Gordon Brown, thanks very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.
Gordon Brown back on screen at least. Now, coming up later this morning, Sarah Smith and the Sunday Politics will be talking about a big week to come in Brexit, with guests including the Housing Minister, Dominic Raab, and she'll also be joined by the former Cabinet Minister and rebel on all things European, Ken Clarke. That's the Sunday Politics at 11, here on BBC One. The Scottish National Party, meanwhile, at their conference in Aberdeen, is being prepared for a summer of campaigning on independence. But can another referendum be carried out before Britain as a whole has left the European Union? Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's First Minister, joins us now from Aberdeen. Good morning, Nicola Sturgeon. Can I ask you...
Good morning, Andrew.
Can I ask you about that timing issue, first of all? Is it possible for you to have another referendum before Scotland, with the rest of the UK, has left the EU?
Well, anything in life is possible, but as you know, I think we've spoken about this before, I feel that the uncertainty around Brexit right now is such that we shouldn't make any decisions on timing about a possible second independence referendum, and I've said I won't give that any further consideration until we get more clarity, which I hope will be sooner rather than later for a whole host of different reasons. And what I was saying to my party conference yesterday was, let's stop obsessing all of the time about when we might get the chance to vote on independence again. Instead, let's engage people in the substantive arguments. Let's address people who still ask the question, why should Scotland be independent? And of course, this is a good time to have a debate that is very much focused on maximising our opportunities as a country, rather than just resigning ourselves to the inevitable damage that Brexit seems destined to do to us.
And yet the timing is crucial, because it's the difference between Scotland potentially becoming independent while still part of the EU with all of those obligations and rights and so forth, or having to start to negotiate to join the EU completely afresh after she had left. And therefore it is very important. And if you are saying, as I think you are, you're not going to look at this again until the autumn, there is not time between then and March 2019, when we leave the EU, to have that second referendum, is there?
No, but even if it doesn't happen before then, Scotland will still have options. I think one of the things Scotland and the people of Scotland are probably going to be quite sceptical about if this issue has been debated again are all the scare stories we heard in 2014 about if we become independent, we'll be thrown out of the European Union and it will take years and years to negotiate our way back in. It's because we didn't become independent that, of course, now we're facing the prospect of being taken out of the EU, even although most people in Scotland didn't vote for for that. But we've got an opportunity. Change is happening. Brexit makes change inevitable. So there's an opportunity to debate the kind of change we want and how we shape that in a way that best serves our interest. Do we want to simply sit back and await the meltdown, to use the language of the Foreign Secretary at the end of the week? Or do we want to look much more positively and build a future based on optimism and hope and how we maximise the many opportunities we have as a country? And I think most people have an appetite to do the latter, to look forward with hope rather than constantly be caught in a debate that seems founded totally on despair, which is the Brexit debate at the moment.
I think if I was watching at home, I would hear Nicola Sturgeon say, in effect, no Scottish independence referendum until after Brexit.
Well, I'm not sure that's a conclusion that anybody should necessarily reach. What people will hear is me saying exactly what I've been saying since this time last year, actually, which is, people feel very uncertain about the Brexit future. It's quite hard to believe in many ways that 2 years on from the referendum, we still have a UK cabinet that can't decide amongst themselves what they want in terms of customs arrangements or future trading arrangements. And I think, and it's certainly something I've had opportunity to reflect on, that people in Scotland think, well, before we're asked to make another big decision about our future, let's have some clarity on the future relationship between the UK and the EU. I've been saying that now consistently for the last year. So I'm not saying anything today to you, Andrew, that I've not been saying repeatedly over the course of the last 12 months.
Well, that's extremely disappointing, Nicola Sturgeon. Can I ask you about
I know, I'm sorry, I'll try.
Can I ask you about the...
I'll try to give you an exclusive in the remainder of the interview.
Thank you very much. Well, this is not probably that, but Amber Rudd and Ian Duncan-Smith, writing today in the Sunday Telegraph, have championed what's happened to the withdrawal bill in the House of Lords, where you wanted all the powers from the EU to transfer straight back to Scotland or Northern Ireland or Wales, and they put a backstop of 7 years before that happens when it comes to big important things like fishing, and I can see the sea behind you, and agriculture. What's your reaction to what's happened there? You've been defeated, and there's no way back.
What's proposed in the withdrawal bill right now is unacceptable to the Scottish Parliament, and the Scottish Parliament voted overwhelmingly against giving consent to what's been described as a power grab. So let me stress, it wasn't simply the SNP that said we shouldn't accept this. Labour, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, it was only the Tories that wanted to sign up to that power grab. Now,
what are you going to do about it?
Well, firstly, our MPs in the House of Commons this week will be trying hard to bring this to the floor of the House for a vote. I'm writing to the Speaker of the House of Commons today to ask him to ensure that there's time for this issue to be properly debated. So I still hope, even at this 11th hour, that common sense will break out on this issue, because this is quite an important issue of principle. This is not about giving the Scottish Parliament new powers or extra powers. It's simply about safeguarding the powers we already have. And there's a very important convention that's underpinned devolution for 20 years now, which is that the UK Parliament doesn't legislate in devolved areas without the consent of the Scottish Parliament. So I hope the Tory government will not rip up that convention.
You think this is an unconstitutional change?
I think it is, based on the conventions that underpin the devolution settlement, not just in Scotland but in Wales and Northern Ireland as well. It is unconstitutional. That's why I hope, and we're getting very close to the end game in this, but I hope that we will see the UK government respect the Scottish Parliament, because if they don't, then I think it will simply prove what a lot of people in Scotland have long believed, that the Tories can't be trusted with devolution.
OK, very, very quickly, there's 14 big votes coming up on Brexit in the House of Commons in the week ahead. Will the SNP be voting against the government on every single one of them?
Well, we'll be voting for customs union membership, we'll be voting for single market membership, we'll be voting to protect the powers of the Scottish Parliament. I don't know that we know exactly what issues will come to the vote, but I think you'll find the SNP opposing. Absolutely. I mean, I think we are getting close to crunch point. We probably should have reached crunch point a long time ago, but the government is trying to reconcile lots of different irreconcilable issues, and they risk taking the UK off a cliff edge on Brexit. So the sooner common sense around issues like the single market and customs union breaks out, the better, and I hope that we will see that happen this week.
Nicola Sturgeon, a misty cliff edge in Aberdeen behind you. Thanks very much indeed for talking to us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Now then, with those crucial votes ahead in the House of Commons, the Labour front bench is telling its MPs to abstain on the important vote about Britain's future trading relationship with the EU. Labour's come up with a different idea, unlikely to be backed by Tory rebels. The Prime Minister may feel this morning she is no longer on the hook. I'm joined by Sir Keir Starmer, Labour's Brexit spokesman. You've let her off the hook, basically, haven't you?
No, we've pushed the Prime Minister all the way on the really big issues, and the two most important for this week are the customs union and a meaningful vote. And I urge Tory MPs who care about this to vote for those amendments. If Tory MPs who do care about those amendments vote with us, there is a real chance for Parliament to change the course of the Brexit negotiations and to bring some order where there's real chaos.
Okay.
Because on this question of a customs union, we're going backwards and forwards for months on end. The government's no further forward. So on the really big vote, which is customs union, on the meaningful vote, which allows Parliament to decide what happens if Article 50 is voted down. They're the really big ones.
You say they're the really big
week.
ones, but nearly half of the Labour peers voted for Britain to stay inside the European Economic Area, the EEA.
Yeah.
And many people saw that as an absolutely crunch vote. And you are ordering Labour MPs, many of whom agree with the peers, to abstain. Why?
Well, I'm sympathetic to the argument that we need a single market deal. I think a lot of discussion this morning has been about the Northern Ireland border. In order to make good on the solemn commitment that there shouldn't be a hard border in Northern Ireland, a border look like? There is infrastructure there. There are checks there. You have to hand in your papers. It is totally incompatible with the solemn commitment to no hard border in
So
Northern Ireland.
you're going to get less of a border than if we were inside the EEA?
Well, the EEA...
I just don't understand how you're going to do this.
The EEA on its own is a group of countries that are outside of a customs union. So the amendment...
It's kind of annexed to the EU.
The amendment that we have put down is one which doesn't tie us to a model that won't work for Britain. The Norway model works for Norway. I can see why people are attracted to it, but it won't work for the United Kingdom. So we've put down one that doesn't tie us to a model, but it does answer the question, should there be a single market deal, by saying, yes, there should, and it needs to go together with the customs union arrangement that we put on the table some months ago.
The trouble with the motion that you've put down is it says you want all those good things, you want frictionless access and jobs and so forth, but you also want an end to free movement. And again, almost everybody with any authority inside the EU, up to and including President Macron of France, has made it crystal clear you can't have that.
Well, what we say in our amendment is that we recognise there are going to have to be shared regulations and shared institutions. And again, in Northern Ireland, you can't have standards one side of the border that are different to standards the other side of the border. Everybody, I think, knows and understands that. So we're answering that question. On the question of freedom of movement, of course that's going to have to be part of the negotiations. In our manifesto, we made it clear that freedom of movement will end when we leave the EU. The question is what comes next. And we need to spell that out. And it needs to be spelt out against a changing position in Europe. As
but you're still saying, basically, we want all the advantages, plus we want no freedom of movement.
No, Andrew, the obligations, the obligations of the single market are that you share regulations, you have common standards, and that you have shared institutions.
And you're part of the four freedoms,
we're facing up to that. We would have to negotiate on the four freedoms, freedom of movement. We need to set out what we want, because this conversation is in a vacuum at the moment. But it's very likely, it seems to me, in the 21st century, that we're going to need an immigration policy that does allow people to cross borders across the UK, across the EU to work. We want people to be able to join their families. We want the best students to come to the UK. So we need to spell out what actually we're asking for, whilst negotiating with the EU against a changing backdrop. As you heard earlier on, in France, there's great concern that freedom of movement should change as far as workers are concerned across borders. There's lots of work on labour market enforcement. If you talk to the EU27, there is lots of shared concern about what the future of freedom of movement is. That's the debate that ought to be going on. That's the debate that ought to have happened over the last 18 months.
Well, you mentioned the customs union.
Yeah.
Do you accept that if the EU is a customs union, there has to be a border somewhere?
Yes, around the customs union countries, at the edge of the
So where
customs...
should the border be?
Well, our proposal is that the UK as a whole is in a customs union with the EU, and that would mean there wouldn't be a border either in Northern Ireland or in the Irish Sea.
So you say that, but we would also have to be part of the single market for there to be no border, because there's all the regulatory requirements.
Yes, I accept that. In other words,
so we would be inside the single market and inside the customs union.
Well, we would have a customs union with the EU because we're going to have a new agreement. We need a single market deal. At the moment, both the customs union arrangements and the single market arrangements are hardwired into the membership agreement. We're leaving that. We need to recreate the right agreement for the UK, which will be a new agreement. And that really is... That should have been the focus of what we're discussing.
A lot of your own MPs have looked at this as well very, very closely, and they still think that the EEA, this annex agreement, is by far the best way of doing it. Neil Kinnock, former party leader, said this week, not continuing in the EEA would mean endangering, sacrificing thousands of skilled and decently paid good jobs, and with them the life chances of countless families and communities. It would be a serious evasion of duty if Labour did not seize this chance to protect our country from the rock slide of a hard Brexit.
Well, I understand the concern that Neil Kinnock and others are expressing because
but you're not responding to it.
The chaos, I mean, people are genuinely concerned, more than at any time I can remember in this process, about whether this government is actually capable now of bringing home a deal. Most people are saying to me, we recognise the EEA, the Norway model, isn't actually the right model. Almost everybody is saying that. It'd have to be massively changed. It doesn't have a customs union. Agriculture is left out. What they're saying to me is, we know it's not quite the right model, but we're going to cling on to it because we're now so worried about what the government is doing. What I'm saying is, let's step back, let's accept the challenge of a single market deal, but set it out in a way that makes sense for the 21st century for the UK.
As a result of doing that and putting down your own front-bench Labour motion instead, which will not be backed by many many Tory rebels, as we're reading today in the papers, you are ensuring that Theresa May is not going to be defeated on anything substantial this week and goes on. Well, you had a chance to bring the government down and you've skipped it.
Well, Andrew, two answers to that. The first is, as I think you and others know very well, there are a number of Labour MPs who are very concerned about the EEA, who will not vote for it, and therefore we can't pretend this is a winnable vote. But let me answer more substantially, because this is a really important issue. We have laid the same amendment to the customs bill and the trade bill, which are now supposedly coming back before the summer, so in the next 3-4 weeks. And they are different bills where we can have a substantive vote and where Tory rebels who care about the single market can lay down their own amendments and we can vote on it then. So the idea that this Tuesday or this Wednesday is the last chance saloon on a single market deal is misconceived. There will be another chance with those bills. I hope we get significant victories this week on the things that matter, which is the meaningful vote, the customs union. Well, that will be the test, and I do urge Tory MPs who care about this. I know it's difficult to back those amendments. We will back those amendments, and if that happens, that will be a defining change this week, and it could happen if those Tory MPs vote with us, and I urge them to do so.
Keir Starmer, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Now, a brief look at what's coming up straight after this programme.
Join us at 10 from Uxbridge, where we'll be debating a truly big subject: how our planet is run, how separate nations come together to make the decisions that affect us all. Is it working, or is the liberal world order in crisis? See you at 10 on BBC One.
David Lidington, the Cabinet Office Minister, is in reality the nearest thing that Theresa May has to a Deputy Prime Minister, and he's with me now. Rough week?
I think it's pretty much par for the course. You know, you've got a parliamentary arithmetic that's always... Parliamentary arithmetic's always difficult. You don't have an overall majority. But whenever I've sat down with the PM, and whether she's talked about Europe or about our domestic policies and on housing and infrastructure and so on. I mean, frankly, she's somebody who tends to put aside all the froth and the commentary and the speculation and focus upon the substance. What's going to make the difference? What's going to give the best deal for the British people?
Well, let's get rid of all the froth and focus on the substance in that case. Is it true that this week the Prime Minister changed the position on the backstop to put in a hard date after she had been fronted up by David Davis?
Well, as always with these things, Andrew, there are discussions between the PM and the relevant ministers about precise wording. We've got a proposal that we've published, that we've put to the European Commission. It's been greeted, as I would rather have hoped, with them saying, well, this is a sensible sort of start for us to have a look at, to negotiate. Well, no, I wouldn't. I would be a bit worried if we presented a proposal and the Commission had instantly, shouted hallelujah and said, we're willing to sign now. This is a negotiation, so we've put something on the table. Michel Barnier's responded constructively. We now need to get down and talk. David Davis is over in Brussels tomorrow to continue those conversations.
You changed the wording after David Davis had gone in. At any point in this week, did you fear that you were going to lose not only David Davis, but a great slew of pro-Brexit ministers?
I've never worried too much about, what the reports are in the press, usually from various aides, about what may or may not happen. When I've talked to David, when I've talked to other colleagues, whichever side they've campaigned on in the Europe referendum, what they're all wanting to do is support the PM in getting a deal that protects jobs and prosperity and growth in this country, that keeps a good, ambitious trading relationship and security relationship with our European neighbours, but also allows us to try to take advantage of opportunities to trade around the world. Same question I asked Keir Starmer. Do you accept that with the EU, as a customs union, there is going to have to be a border? Well, what we're proposing on customs is two possible models that get around the issue of the Irish border, where we've given a very clear commitment, no hard border on the island of Ireland. And those would involve either us collecting the tariffs on behalf of the EU, or a way of managing possible tariff differences on the island without there being border checks. So there are two things here. First of all is Boris Johnson's comment this week that this Irish border issue is now gumming up and retarding the entire negotiation. In his view, it's the tail wagging the dog, he said. The Irish border is important. I mean, anybody who, like me, grew up with the Troubles as a background knows that stability in Northern Ireland is important, and I've talked to traders on both sides of the border. I know how important having no border checks and open border is. But the point, the whole cabinet, Andrew, endorsed the PM's Mansion House speech, in which she said in terms, securing no hard border on the island of Ireland is a fundamental negotiating principle as we approach these talks with the EU. Absolutely. And as you said, there's two proposals on the table at the moment from the government about ways to resolve this. We're going to get a white paper in, what, about 4 weeks or so on this? Yeah, we'll be meeting, as the Prime Minister said, we're meeting in July to go through this in greater detail. No, it's going to be a detailed, very wide-ranging white paper, so it's really important that ministers thrash this out together and we get the detail right. And we'll get this in about a month's time, as I say. That seems to be the word. In that white paper, will we have a resolution as to which of those two answers to the Irish border problem the government now favours? Yes, we've consistently said that we will be putting forward in the white paper our proposed way forward on customs, but along with many other details of how we see the future relationship between ourselves and our European neighbours. And only if that fails does the so-called backstop come into play. I'm slightly confused about the language the government has used about this backstop now. I read it out. The UK expects the future arrangement to be in place by the end of December, December 2021 at the latest. What does the word expects mean? Exactly what it says. It might not happen. If you look at what's going to have to happen, we know that in the autumn of this year we're going to need to get agreement on the text of the withdrawal agreement, which includes the backstop arrangement, fallback for Ireland. And you expect or hope that it'll be over by 2021. Alongside that, Andrew, the House of Commons and the European Parliament are both very clear. They will need clarity about what it is we are transitioning to at the end of the implementation period. So that will be part of the consideration of both parliaments about what we do. I mean, when we get to end of the implementation period. Yeah, I mean, we think then, if we need the backstop, we hope we won't, that we'll be able to switch to the new arrangements seamlessly. But if not, it's there for a short time. And the EU itself has always said, Andrew, has always said you cannot have a permanent solution on the basis of a withdrawal agreement.
It's delightfully, waffly, soft kind of language. It expects, hopes. That's the kind of thing if your wife calls you in the pub and says, what time are you going to be home? I expect to be home by 7, knowing jolly well it'll be 8 o'clock or 9. It's that kind of language.
It's being absolutely sensible and reasonable. If we get a good deal with the EU that needs ratification in national parliaments, one of them might delay. There might be an election in one country before they get around to it. You know?
Here's a very, very clear way of resolving this. Can you be absolutely sure, here and now, that by the time of the next election in 2022, we will have left the EU completely?
We will have left the EU at the end of March 2019. I mean, that's what the treaty
in terms there'll be no backstop. By which I mean there'll be no backstop by the time of the next election.
Certainly. I mean, I know the PM's intention, my hope, that everybody is working towards getting this sorted as soon as we possibly can. We are expecting to get the withdrawal agreement sorted this autumn and to have agreed a very ambitious new economic and security partnership with the EU that it's in their interest as well as ours to put in place as rapidly as possible.
Now, all this takes place against the background of a government which doesn't seem to quite agree with itself about the essence of Brexit. I'm going to give you a little favour, quiet, relaxing time now, and play you a little bit of Boris Johnson's comments at a private dinner that the audio quality isn't brilliant, but the words are pretty clear. Let's hear them.
The Treasury, which is basically the heart of Remain, perceives the risk. What they don't want is friction at the borders. They don't want any disruption of the economy. So they're sacrificing all the medium and long-term gains as a tier of short-term disruption. The Project Fear is really working on it. They're terrified of this nonsense. People mumbo-jumbo.
OK, well, the crucial thing there, I think, is that he was going for the Treasury as the heart of Project Remain and Project Fear. And you know, and I know, that it's not just Boris Johnson. Lots of Brexiteers look at Philip Hammond and they say, this is the man who is gumming up the works when it comes to Brexit, who is delaying everything.
That's not a picture I recognise. I mean, I've worked with Philip for quite a few years in government now. I mean, he's somebody who has accepted the verdict of the British people in the referendum. He is working extremely hard to deliver on that and to deliver on it in a way that looks after jobs and prosperity in this country. And that's a commitment the entire government is behind.
I mean, he's also very upset about the tone of these negotiations, and he's hoping that Theresa May takes a more combative tone at the next summit. He's even said that Donald Trump would do a better job. What would it be like if Donald Trump was running the Brexit negotiations, David?
I think I'm very happy for the American people to take decisions about President Trump, and we respect that, and we work with the elected leaders of the United States. The British public have got a British Prime Minister, and if you look at Theresa May's record, December last year, March this year, everybody was saying in the media, oh, it's all going to end in disaster. She got good deals at both those European summits, and I'm very confident she'll do that again.
Since then, you know that the mood music, the words from Brussels have been increasingly tough, sometimes very aggressive and very unpleasant. This is the moment, surely, when the Prime Minister does need to take a more combative tone.
I think anybody who's had dealings with Theresa May, in public or private, knows that she doesn't shirk from being tough. It's the substance of the toughness that matters, not particular rhetoric, particular speeches. And I think the public appreciate that. That's why, though we've been in government for 8 years now, we were 7 points ahead in the most recent opinion poll.
Are you expecting a meltdown in these talks?
I'm expecting the talks to move forward. No, I'm not expecting a meltdown. What I'm expecting, I'm working towards, supporting the PM towards, is to get a successful deal, as she did at the summit in December, as she did at the summit in March. And I hope all my colleagues in Parliament will get behind her in the same way.
You'll have seen the stories all over the papers about Aaron Banks and the Russian ambassador and gold mines and all the rest of it. Now, I know that they were not the official Leave campaign. They were not connected to the Conservative government. But nonetheless, as somebody carrying out the result of that Brexit referendum, is there anything about that makes you uneasy?
Well, clearly, they are serious allegations, but we have in this country a system where there are independent agencies to look at allegations of malpractice. Quite rightly, ministers can't either initiate or stop any such investigation. So I'd say those who've got the evidence, let them take it to the relevant authorities and let it be looked into.
And on a related matter, because this is also connected to the Trump campaign, we mentioned Trump already, are you concerned as a government now that we are heading towards a trade war with the United States?
I don't think a trade war does anybody any good. I think that we need to find. I think that the lessons of trade wars in the past are that everybody loses. So I think we need to work with the United States and with our European partners and other powers like Japan to try to find multilateral solutions to this, because frankly, I believe that ordinary families benefit from free trade.
David Lidington, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. That is all we have time for. Thanks to all my guests. I'll be back here next Sunday at 9 when I'm talking to the actor turned director Rupert Everett. Worth watching that. There will be music, Florence and the Machine, live. But until then, goodbye. I'm sorry.